I have no idea how many times I've played that over the years under Max, but the message always came through loud and clear. Max Wood, I've always thought of him as the quintessential bandmaster through my life. In Psalm 98, 4 through 6, it says, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Burst into jubilant song with music. Make music with the harp to the Lord, with the harp and the sound of singing, with the trumpets and the blast of the ram's horn. Shout for joy before the Lord, the King." That's Max to me, shouting before the Lord with the joy through his music. Can't you see him now? I can see him. Can you see him? I can see him before those pearly gates, standing up there with millions of trumpet and cornet players. All the great trumpet players, cornet players in the history of cornet and trumpet playing. All those millions of trumpet players playing perfectly in tune, all together. Great phrases like we were always taught to play from Max, playing out that trumpet call from the call of the righteous. Max's favorite. He taught that thing over and over and over again. I can remember in band listening to that trumpet call, thinking to myself, are they ever going to get it right? But he persisted. He stayed with it, and he always made it happen. So that's how I think of him today. Not sad, but a celebration of Max and his life. This is a time of celebration. And knowing Max as well as we do, for me that's, I hate to say it, but around 60 years, I know he would want no sadness today. He would want no long faces, no tears, but joy and celebration. That he's gone home to be with the Lord. He's gone home to be with Ruth, and he's gone home to be with so many friends and relatives that he's known all of his life. So it is indeed a time of celebration. And it's a great promise we have, isn't it, as Christians, that we know eventually we'll go to be with the Lord. And that was the promise that Max took with him as he went. I take a minute here just to bring greetings from my wife, Marge. Some of you will know her. It's been 40 years since we were soldiers at the Royal Oak Corps, so many of you won't. But she wanted to be here desperately, and she, the other day, found out she has a fractured bone fracture in her foot. So we had to put one of those big casts on there, those big thumpy casts that she has to wear around. I started calling her Thumpy, but I think the stress comes from living with me for 54 years. But she wanted to be here and sends her condolences and her greetings to you, and would be here if she possibly could have. And also for my older brother Clyde. Many of you will remember Clyde and Nancy, who were soldiers at the Corps, played under Max from the time that we all started with the Corps. And from her brother Paul and his beautiful wife Becky, who's here with us. Our son tried to come, but all these hurricanes and everything going on has kept him in Chicago right now, so he couldn't be here. But and also other children said hello. And they grew up for a few years in this Corps before we moved. But Max was so much an incredible influence in the ministry of our lives. And so it was wonderful to be able to come back. It is wonderful. We could tell many funny stories about Max and the rehearsals that he gave and all of his musical ministry. But my time right now is limited this morning, so I just want to really pay tribute to my friend and my mentor. He was far more than a friend. He was a mentor and a teacher, like Bill said. A wonderful teacher. Again, I think of him as the quintessential bandmaster, or the perfect essence of what a Salvation Army bandmaster should be. Because he gave of himself beyond whatever that description is, if you will, of what a bandmaster should be. Always went way beyond that. He was a mentor in all things for me, musically and spiritually. He was my musical father, no question about it. I look back over those years. Next to my own father, I would say he was probably, he was the most influential person in my life, my formative years. And I'm sure many others sitting here tonight, this afternoon, can say exactly the same thing. Tremendous influence, not only musically, but even if we weren't musical, he was tremendous inspiration spiritually. Like Bill, I took euphonium lessons with him. Actually, I started euphonium lessons before he was even the bandmaster, so that tells you how old I am. It was just wonderful to have that opportunity to get to see him from another point of view. I took lessons with him through middle school, high school, and then changed other teachers when I went away to university. But he also gave lessons to generations of people sitting here this morning, generations. And his influence is still seen through his students who are teaching and their students who are teaching and their students who are teaching continuously. Those number of generations are massive in the influence he had on their lives. I want to bring greetings from Chuck Few to the Woods. He lived across the street, I think. Max, I think his dad was a trumpet player, wasn't he, with the Detroit Symphony or something? His father was a trumpet player at the Detroit Symphony, but he took lessons from Max. I loved it. I always thought that was wonderful. But Chuck and I have become friends over the years. I had never met him in those years, but we've become friends over the years on Facebook. And every time he writes to me, he always asks, how is Max doing? How are Max and Ruth doing? What's happening? What's the news? And I always try to keep him up to date on what was happening. And you know, Max in my private lessons always made me sing my lessons. Before I could ever play it, I had to sing it. Very frustrating, but extremely worthwhile. If I couldn't sing it, he said, you can't play it. So I had to sing it. My passion for arranging and composition and his abilities as a arranger, and some of us don't even know that, because his music has kind of, for some reasons, disappeared over the years. But he was a wonderful arranger, composer, and I think that drew us together. At least I know it drew me to him, and I just bugged him continuously and followed him continuously and asked for help, and he always gave it. Hours he spent poring over my scores, looking at them, making suggestions, but never once said, well, that's really awful. You know, he could have when I was first starting out. He never said that, always Mr. Positive. I guess my one big frustration with Max was that he was such a fine writer. I always wanted to see his music in print. I wanted him to send it over to England or wherever they were publishing music and to get it published, but he just didn't seem to have that interest. It was just, you know, here I was. I wanted to be a composer, an arranger, and get my music published. Why not Max? I wanted to see that music on my music stand with Max Wood's name on it, but it wasn't one of his big priorities. In fact, you will all recall, like Bill just did, introducing Piece of Heart, Max loved to introduce the pieces on Sunday, the congregation, trying to make it more relative to the congregation and to the band as well, what the composer was thinking. And he had such a wonderful way of getting inside the composer's head and figuring that out. And the story goes, I guess, that one Sunday he got up to introduce a piece to the congregation that I had written. And the first thing out of his mouth was, well, Jim Curnow, he's one of the biggest fruits of the Royal Oak Corps. and Max didn't even think about it. All of a sudden, there were a couple of giggles from the band. Then Max started to giggle, and it was all over, you know. You know how he goes, kind of shakes all over when he laughs. And it took him a long time, I guess, for the band to settle down and figure out what they actually had to play a piece of music. I would write pieces for the Royal Oak Band, and he would critique them for me, free of charge, you know. Never asked for a penny. He would look them over, red marks all over the place, you know. And then he had the audacity to make me stand up and conduct them with the band. And then he had the audacity to critique my conducting and my rehearsal technique. And it was all for free. Never asked for anything. And I cherished every minute of that. He could say anything he wanted to me, and I was like a sponge. I wanted to hear what this wonderful teacher had to say. I had the privilege also as a young student in my undergrad days of doing my student teaching with Max. Now, we all know Max from the corps, and Max is conducting the music from the corps, but I knew Max as a teacher too, and many people here did today. But I actually had a chance to student teach with him and watch him in action. What a marvelous master teacher. Absolutely masterful in his craft. And it was an unbelievable experience for me to watch this man work with small kids in elementary school. And I watched him over and over and over again and applied all of that, I think, in my teaching. I could see myself saying all these things over again that Max had been teaching. So he was a master teacher. He constantly taught through music. He would spend hours preparing his scores for band rehearsal. Some conductors grab a score on the way to the podium and start rehearsing, not Max. He was into the music, spent hours on emphasis on the right interpretation of phrases, the musical aspect, the spiritual aspect as well, and the music. So his important emphasis to me was always the spiritual aspect of the music. How can we portray to people through our music the love of Jesus Christ for each one of us? Although I had the privilege of having many fine teachers in middle school and high school and through my university days, there was always something that I knew that was extremely special about Max Wood, his abilities and his love for people. He could get music out of anything, and I kid you not, or anyone. It was incredible how he could take just a few people and make music happen with the music ministry. I originally said he was a quintessential bandmaster, but really I think he went far beyond that. He did for all of us, my brothers, and everyone in the corps, far more than the norm that was expected out of a bandmaster. He gave us a sense of quality in our music making and in our music ministry. It wasn't quality for the quality's sake alone, but for the ministry. There should be quality ministry as we played our instruments for the glory of God. He gave us a true sense of the necessity of giving our lives to music ministry as lay people. I think that's one of the reasons over the years I've given my time as a layman in the church, because I saw Max set an example that was exemplary in all things as a layman in the church. He gave us a special spiritual depth to our music ministry. He gave us a role model to follow. And I think that was one of the biggest things for me, that role model of the Christian musician. And I think as a result over the years, my ministry inside the church and outside the church is a result of what Max gave to us all. As a composer, conductor, music educator, I find myself constantly using what Max taught me as I teach others, not only musically, but spiritually and in my daily living. I think God sent us, our family, the Curnow family, a really special gift. When my father got a job, we were living in Port Huron, my father got a job with Detroit Edison, and we moved to Royal Oak and became a part of the Royal Oak Corps. That was an incredible gift for us. The bigger gift was when Max and Ruth moved here, and we had that influence year after year after year. His spirit, his love, his musical abilities. And it was a God thing. No question about it in my life. That he was here as a result, and I like to think that he was here because of us. That we as a family got to benefit from his wonderful love and dedication, and see the dedication of a Christian musician. Another scripture reference, Psalm 101 and 2. Some of you will know a little piece that I wrote several years ago called A Psalm of Praise, based on this scripture. But I think, again, it personifies Max Shout for joy, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. And he did, every day of his life. Come before him with joyful songs. To me, the scripture personifies Max's life, and the Max that I witnessed in a secular setting and I witnessed in a sacred setting. Always the same, always consistent. I love you, Max. Enjoy that heavenly band.